Oh, okay. Hello everyone. This is Milk Project, and today I'm gonna continue to read Krasznahorkai's Satantango. But first of all, wherever you are, Happy New Year! It's 2026, so I hope every one of you will have a wonderful year. And before getting started, I'm gonna review the terms we encountered last time. Yeah, so it's been a month or two, so for me it's a good time to review vocabulary terms. And alright, let's get started. And Celine, clangor, loud repeating clanging sound. Hobble. Well, this is related to horses, I guess. Yeah, so I think this is similar to like feathers or something that restricts something else. Fly. To cause to fly. To cause a fright, a scare, or fear. Dilapidate. To squander or waste. Derelict. Property abandoned by its former owner, especially a ship abandoned at sea. Conspiring. Buyers. Rickety. Mildew. Fidget. Nervous wiggling or twitching motion. Stutter. Nitrous. Veritable. Bough. A firm branch of a tree. Pot. Blather. Wad. Phosphorescent. Gesticulate. Grimace. Brusque. Cushy. Duvet. Vantage. Oh yeah, so this is related to advantage. Throb. A beating vibration or a palpitation. Frail. Well, this is related to a girl. A basket made of rushes, used chiefly to hold figs and raisin. The quantity of fruit or other items contained in a frail. So, as a noun, this word can be used for a tool. Namely basket, but as a verb, This means to play a stringed instrument, usually a banjo, or tickling with a back of a fingernail. And as an adjective, easily broken physically, not firm or durable. So this has a connotation of weakness, or fragile. Something fragile. Way. Time worn. Admonitory. Loud. A troublemaker, often violent, a rude, violent person, a yob. Squint. An expression in which the eyes are partially closed. Squint. Darning. Darning. Euphemism of them to repair by stitching with thread or yarn, particularly by using a needle to construct a weave across a damaged area of fabric. A repair made by darning. So this word may be related to fabric or clothes. Fling. This is basically throwing. Shoddy. A low-grade cloth made from byproducts of wool processing or from recycled wool. Or worthless goods. Castrate. Snarl. To entangle or to complicate. Rumpled. To make wrinkled, particularly fabric. Poleaxe. An axe having both a blade and hammer face. Used to slaughter cattle. So basically, an axe that is used to kill animals. Sly. Artfully cunning. Secretly mischievous. Wily. Balustrade. A row of balusters topped by a rail, serving as an open parapet along the edge of balcony, terrace, bridge, staircase, or the eaves of a building. Sergeant. Bickering. To quarrel in a tiresome, insulting manner. Jowl. The jawbone, especially one of the little parts of the mandible. Stifle. A hind knee of various mammals, especially horses. A born disease of this region. To interrupt or cut off. So this, as a verb, this can be a figurative sense. Bug. A heavy, musty, and unpleasant atmosphere, usually in a poorly ventilated area. Stroll. A way of thinking slowly while lengthening vowel sounds and running words together. Drawl. Cheapskate. Bulge. Hem. An utterance or sound of voice like hem, often indicative of hesitation or doubt, sometimes used to call attention. Unquenchable. Chiseled. Chiseled. Inter. To bury in a grave. Or to confine as in a prison. Percolate. To pass a liquid through a porous substance. To filter. Downpour. Billow. Billow.
Billow.
Billow. Billow. A large wave. Billow. Imprecation. A curse. Bedragget. Bedraggled.
Bedraggled.
Bedraggled. To make something wet and limp, especially by dragging it along the ground. Wet and limp. Unkempt. Decaying, decrepit, or dilapidated. Bedraggled. Scrunch. To grind with the teeth and with a cracking sound. To crunch. Trick. Larval. Shilly-shally. Indecision, irresolution. To procrastinate. To vacillate. Shilly-shally. From. Away, back or backward. Okay, now let's go back to the book. And last time we've read till we read a part of chapter 2. The chapter 2 of the first part. And I believe we stopped at the sentence starting with Jeremias 2 moves away from the bar and opens the door, but then turns back out next sentence. Okay, so let's start here. A couple of days, that's all we have left. Jeremias will blow you to pieces. He spits out by way of parting first his lip, and by way of a grand finale, runs his gaze slowly over the terrified larval faces. The stench of sewers mixed with the mad puddles, the smell of the old crack of lightning, while tugging at tiles, power lines, empty nests. The the stifling heat behind low, ill-fitting windows. Impatient, annoyed half-hours of lovers embracing, demanding wails of babies, their cries sliding off into the thin smell of dusk. Streets, pliable, parks soaked to their roots lying obedient to the rain, bare oaks, half-broken dry flowers, scorched grass, all prostrate. Prostrate. Humbled by the storm, sacrifices strewn at the executioner's feet. Petrina whizzes at Erima's heels. Are we going to see Steigerwald? But his companion does not hear him. He has turned up the collar of his houndstooth coat, his hands thrust deep into his pockets, his head raised, and hurrying blindly from street to street, never slowing, never looking back, his soaked cigarette dropping from his mouth, though he doesn't even notice it. While Petrina continues to curse the word with an inexhaustible supply of imprecations, his bow legs buckling every so often, and when he falls 20 paces behind Eremash, vainly shouting after him, "Hey, wait for me. Don't be in such rush." What I am, a cow in a stampede. Though the other pays no attention, and the other pays no attention at all, and to make matters worse, he treads in a paddle up to his ankles, gives a great puff, leans against the wall of a horse and mutters, "I can't keep up with this." But after a couple of minutes, Irmash reappears, his wet hair hanging over his eyes, his pointed bright heel shoes kicked in the mud. Water drips off Petrina. "Look at this," he says, pointing to his ears. "Goose flesh, frozen." Irmash nods reluctantly, clears his throat, and says, "Where are you going to the estate?" Petrina stares at him, his eyes popping out. "What, now? The two of us? To the estate?" Irmash pulls another cigarette from the pack, lights it, and quickly blows the smoke out. "Yes, right now." Petrina leans against the wall. "Listen here, old friend, master, saver, slave driver. You'll be the death of me. I am frozen through. I'm hungry. I want to find somewhere else, somewhere warm where I can dry out and eat, and I have no desire at all, God knows, to tramp out to the estate in this foul weather. In fact, I'm quite disinclined to follow you, to run after you like a lunatic. Damn your already damned soul. Damn it." Hermes gives a wave and replies indifferently, "If you don't want to stay with me, go where you please." And he's gone. "Where are you going? Where are you off to now?" Petrina shouts after him in anger, setting off to follow him. "Where would you go without me? Stop for a second. Come on." The rain eases off as little as they leave the town. Night descends. No stars, no moon. At the Elk crossroads, 100 yards ahead of them, a shadow sways, only ladder do they discover it is a man in a trench coat. He enters a field and the darkness swallows him. That darkness swallows him. On either side of the highway there are gloomy patches of woodland as far as the eye can see, not covering everything since the fading light blurs all clear outlines, consuming all traces of color. Stable forms begin to move while things that should move stand as if petrified. The whole highway is like a strange vessel run aground, idling and rocking on the muddy ocean. Not a bird is stirring to leave its mark on the sky that has hardened to solid mass that, like a morning mist, hovers above the ground. Only a solitary frightened deer rises and sinks in the distance, as if the mud itself were breathing, preparing to flee in the far distance. Dear God, Petrina sighs. When I think it will be morning before we get there, I get cramp in my legs. Why didn't we ask Tigerwald if we could borrow his truck? And that coat too. But I'm a curious strong man. Irma stops, puts his foot up on a milestone, pulls out a cigarette. They both take one and light them using their hands as shelter. Can I ask you something, Peter? What? Why are we going to the stage? Why? Do you have anywhere to sleep? Do you have anything to eat? Money? Either you stop your eternal whining or I strangle you. Okay, fine, I understand. This match anyway. But tomorrow we've got to go back. Haven't we? Irmas grinds his teeth but says nothing. Petrina gives another sigh. Look, friend, you really could have thought of something else with that clever head of yours. I don't want to stay with those people the way I am. I can't stand being in one place. Petrina was born under open skies. That's where he's lived all his life, and that's where he'll die. Irmas dismisses him with a bitter gesture. We're in the shit, friend. There's nothing we can do about that for a while. We have to stay with them. Petrina wrings his hands. Master, please don't say things like that. My heart is already pounding. Okay, don't crap in your pants. Well, we'll take their money then. We'll move on. We manage somehow. They settle again. You think they have money? Petrina asked anxiously. Peasants always have something. They proceed without speaking, mile after mile. They must be roughly halfway between the turnoff and the local bar. Occasionally a star twinkles in front of them, only to vanish again in the dense dark. Sometimes the moon shines through the mist, and like the two exhausted figures on the paved road below, escapes with them across the celestial battlefield, pushing its way past every obstacle towards its target, right until dawn. I wonder what the bumpkins will say when they see us. It will be a surprise. Irmas replies over his shoulder. Petrina picks up the pace. What makes you think they'll be there at all? He asked in his anxiety. I figure they'll have made tracks ages ago. They must have that much intelligence. Intelligence? Grins Illinois. them, servants is what they were, and that's what they'll remain until they die. They'll be sitting in the kitchen, shitting themselves in the corner, taking the odd look out of the window to see what the others are doing. I know these people like the back of my hand. I don't know how you can be so sure of that, friend. That's Petrina. My hunch is that there won't be anyone there. Empty houses, the tiles fallen or stolen. At best, one or two starved rats in the mill. No. Irma's confidently retorts. They'll be sitting in exactly the same place, on the same filthy stools, stuffing themselves with the same filthy spuds and paprika every night, having no idea what happened. They'll be eyeing each other suspiciously, only breaking the silence to belch. They are waiting. They are waiting patiently, like the long-suffering lot they are, in the firm conviction that someone has conned them. They are waiting, belly to the ground, like cats at pig-killing time, hoping for scrap. They are like servants that work at a castle where the master has shot himself. They hang around at an utter loss as to what to do. Enough poetry, boss. I am terrified enough already. Petrina tried to calm himself while pressing his rumbling stomach. But Irimash paid him no attention. He's on a roll. They are slaves who have lost their master but can't live without what they call pride, honor, and courage. That's what keeps their souls in place, even if at the back of their thick skulls they sense these quantities aren't their own, that they've simply enjoyed living in the shadow of their masters. Enough! Petrina groans and rubs his eyes because the water keeps running down his flat forehead. Look, don't be cross, but I just can't bear listening to such stuff right now. You can tell me all about them tomorrow. For now, I'd sooner you talk about a good steaming bowl of bean soup. But Hermes ignores this too and goes on undisturbed. Then wherever the shadow falls, they follow, like a flock of sheep, because they can't do without a shadow, just as they can't do without pomp and splendor either. For God's sake, cut it out, old man, please. Petrina cries in his agony. They are doing anything not to be left alone with a remnant of pomp and splendor. Because when they are left alone, they go mad. Like mad dogs, they fall on whatever remains and tear it to bits. Give them a well-heated room, a cauldron bubbling with paprika stew, a few ducks, and they'll be dancing on the table every night, and even happier under warm bedclothes, panting away with a tasty piece of the neighbor's stout wife to tuck into. Are you listening to me, Petrina? Anyway, the other sighs in reply and as in hope. Why? Have you finished? By now they can see the blown blown over fences, like the blown over fences of the roadside houses. The tumble down shed, the rusty water tank, when right beside them, a hoarse voice called them from behind a high stack of weeds. Wait, it's me, a 12 or 13-year-old boy, completely chilled and soaked to the bone, wearing trousers rolled up the knee, rushed toward them, drenched, trembling, his eyes shining. Katrina is the first to recognize him. So it's you. What are you doing here? You little good for nothing? I've been hiding here for hours. He announces with pride and quickly looks down. His long hair hangs in knots over his body face, a cigarette glowing between his bent fingers. Irimas takes patient shot of the boy, who steals the odd look at him but immediately lowers his eyes again. What do you want? Katrina quizzes him. Shaking his head, the boy steals another glance at Irimas. You promised, he stutters, and stops. That if come on by, spit out. Irimas passes him. That if I told people that you were. The boy finally blurts out, kicking the ground all the while. Dead. Then you fix me up with Mrs. Schmidt. Katrina pulls the boy's ear and snaps at him. What's this? No sooner hatched and out of the egg, but you already want to climb up lady's skirt, you little scoundrel. You little scoundrel. What's next? The boy frees himself and shouts, eyes flashing in anger. I tell you what you should be pulling, you old goat. The skin off your dick. If Irimas did not intervene, there'd be a fight. Enough. He bellows. How did you know we were on the way? Bill. How did you know we were on the way? The boy stands at careful distance from Petrina, rubbing his ear. That's my business. It doesn't matter anyway. Everyone knows by now, the driver told them. Petrina is cursing, looking up at the sky, but Irimas gestures for him to be quiet. Use your brains, leave him alone, and turns to the boy. What driver? Coleman. He lives by the electronic. That's where he saw you. Coleman. He become a bus driver? Yes, since spring on the cross-country road. But the bus is in service at the moment, so he has time to loaf around. Okay, says Irimas and sets off. The boy hurries to keep pace with him. I did what you asked me to do. I hope you'll keep your power up. I generally keep my promises. Irimas answers coolly. The boy follows him like a shadow. Sometimes he catches up with him and points up at his face, then falls behind again. Katrina trails still further behind, a long way back, and though they can't make out his voice, they are aware he is continually cursing the ceaseless rain, the mud, the boy, and the world at large. To hell with it all. I still have the photograph, said the boy, some 200 yards on. But Aramis does not hear him, or pretend not to have heard. His head raised high, he is striding down the middle of the road, slicing the darkness with his hooked nose and sharp chin. The kid tries again. Don't you want to see the photograph? Aramis turns slowly to look at him. What photograph? Petrina has caught up with them. Do you want to see? Aramis nods. Stop beating around the bush, you little devil. Petrina hurries him. You won't be cross? No, okay? You must let me hold it, the boy adds and reached into his shirt. In the photograph there, standing in front of a street vendor, Aramis on the right, his hair combed and parted on the side, wearing a houndstooth jacket, and a red tie. The crease on his trousers broken at the knee.
Houndstooth.
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 Houndstooth. Petrina is beside him in a pair of satin breeches and an outsized undershirt, the sun shining through his jagged ears. Aramis has screwed up his eyes and gives a mocking smile. Petrina is solemn and ceremonial. His eyes happen to be closed. His mouth slightly open. Someone's hand intrudes into the picture on the left, the fingers holding a banknote of 50. Behind them, a merry-go-round that has been tipped over, or is in process of being tipped over. Well, would you look at that? Petrina remarks in delight. It's Ria's friend. I'll be darned if it isn't. Pass it over. Let me get a better look at that old man of mine. The boy pushes his hand away. Nah, get lost. You think this is a free show I'm giving here? Get your filthy paws off. And so saying, he slipped the photo back in its little clear plastic sleeve and back inside his shirt. Oh, come on, kid. Petrina purrs, pleading. Let's have another look. I hardly has a chance to see anything. If you want to see more of it, then... The boy hesitates. Then you'll have to fix me up with the bar owner's wife. She has nice big tits, too. Petrina curses and sets off. What's next, you big brat? The boy slaps him on the back, then rushes after Aramis. Petrina fishes in the air after him for a while, then he remembers the photograph, smiles and hums, and walks a little faster. They are at the crossroads. From here, it's only half an hour. The boy looks at Aramis adoringly, leaping now to the left, now to the right of him. Mary is spurring the bar owner. He loudly explains as he goes, taking the odd puff at his cigarette that has burned right down to his fingers by now. Mrs. Schmidt does it with the cripple, has for a long time. The headmaster does it to himself. Really repulsive. You can't begin to imagine. Ah, my sister has gone totally crazy. There's nothing but listen and spy. She spies on everyone all the time. Ma beats her, but it's no use. Nothing is of any use. It's like people said she will remain gaga all her life. Believe it or not, the doctor just sits at home and all the time, doing nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just sits there all day, all night. He even sleeps in his chair. His whole place smells. It's like a rat's nest. The light on day and night, not that it matters to him. He sits there smoking high-class cigarettes. You'll see. It's just like I told you. And I almost forgot today's the day when Schmidt and Kraner are bringing the money home for the poultry. Yes. The poultry.
Poultry.
Poultry. Yes, that's what they've all been doing since February, except Ma, because the filthy swine did not include her. The mill, nobody goes there. The place is full of rooks, and my sisters, because that's where they go to whore. But what idiots, just imagine. Ma takes all their money, and all they do is sit and weep. I wouldn't let that happen, you can be sure of that. We're in the bar. That doesn't work anymore. That doesn't work anymore. The landlord's wife is so full of herself now. She's swollen up like a cow's ass, but luckily she has moved into the townhouse at last and will stay there till spring. Because she said she wasn't going to stay here up to her neck in mud, and you have to laugh. The landlord has to go home once a month, and when he comes back, it's like his head the shit kicked out of him. She lays into him so. In any case, he has sold that great Panon bike he had and bought some crap machine that he is having to push around all the time, and everyone's around. The whole estate, when it starts up, because he's always delivering something to somebody. But then everyone has to push it. That's if the engine starts at all. And yes, he tells everyone that he hasn't won some country race riding that wreck you have to wrap. He's with little sister for now because we owe him for a seat since last year. By now the window of the bar is visible, glowing ahead of them. But there's no sound, not a single word to be heard. As if the place were deserted. Not a soul. But now someone is playing a harmonica. Erima scrapes the mud off his lead-heavy shoes, clears throat, cautiously opens the door, and the rain begins again. While to the east, twists as memory, the sky brightens, scarlet and pale blue, and leans against the undulating horizon, to be followed by the sun, like a beggar daily panning up to his spot on the temple steps, full of her bag and misery, ready to establish the world of shadows, to separate the trees one from the other, to raise out of freezing, confusing homogeneity of night in which they seem to have been trapped like flies in a web, clearly defined earth and sky with distinct animals and men, the darkness still in flight of the edge of things, somewhere on the far side on the western horizon, where its countless terrors vanish one by one like a disparate, confused, defeated army. Okay, so this ends chapter 2. And yeah, give me a second. to drink something. Okay, now let's read chapter 3 of part 1. To know something. At the end of the Paleozoic era of the whole of Central Europe began to sink. Naturally, our Hungarian homeland is part of this process. In the new geological circumstances, the hill masses of the Paleozoic era sink ever lower until they reach rock bottom, at which point of the sedimental sea inundates and covers them. As the sinking continues, the territory of Hungary becomes the northwestern basin of that part of the sea that covers southern Europe. The sea continues to dominate the region right through the Mesozoic era. The doctor was sitting by the window. The doctor was sitting by the window feeling morose, his shoulder up against the cold, damp wall, and he didn't even have to move his head to look through the gap between the dirty floral curtain, inherited from his mother, and the rotten window frame in order to see the estate, but had only to raise his eyes from his book, take a brief glance to note the slightest change, and if it now and then happened, say if he was utterly lost in thought or because he had focused on one of the remotest points of the estate, that his eyes missed something. His exceedingly sharp eyes immediately came to his aid, though it was rare for him to be lost in thought, and rarer still for him to rise in his fur-colored winter coat from the heavily blanketed stuffed armchair, its position precisely determined by the cumulative experience of his everyday activities, successfully reducing to a minimum the number of possible occasions on which he would have to leave his observation post by the window. Yeah, I've seen this word, but I don't remember the meaning. Let's look at morose. Morose. Of course, on a day-to-day basis, this was by no means an easy task. On the contrary, he had to collect and arrange in the optimal fashion all that was necessary for eating, drinking, smoking, daily writing, and reading, as well as the countless other little necessary details of daily life. And what was more, it meant he had to give up the idea of learning the odd skill, due entirely to some personal weakness, go unpunished, for if he did so, he would be acting against his own interests, since an error due to distraction or carelessness instead increased the danger, and their consequences were far graver than a man might think. One's superfluous movement might mask a sign of the onset of vulnerability. A matchstick or brandy glass in the wrong place was a monument to the destructive efforts of declining memory, not to mention the, the fact that it necessitated further modifications of behavior. So sooner or later, it would mean reconsidering the place of the cigarette, the notebook, the knife, and the pencil too, and soon the whole system of optimal movement would be obliged to change. Chaos would ensue, and all would be lost. It had not been the work of a moment establishing the best conditions for observation. No, it had taken years, a series of day-by-day refinements, a process of self-flagellation, punishment, and wave after wave nausea following endless errors. But with the passing of initial uncertainty and an occasional bout of despair, the time came when he no longer had to watch each and every distinct movement. When objects finally arrived at their fixed final positions, and he himself could assure firm, automatic control of his sphere of action at the most minute level, at which point he could admit to himself, without any danger of self-deception or overconfidence, that his life was capable of functioning perfectly. Of course, it took a while, even months after achieving this, for the fear to leave him, because he knew that however faultless his assessment of his situation in the neighborhood might be, he still depend on others for his supplies of food, spirits, cigarettes, and other invulnerable items. His anxieties about Mrs. Granner, whom he had entrusted with his food shopping, and his doubts about the bar owner immediately proved to be unfounded. The woman was punctilious. The woman was punctilious, and it had proved possible to wean her off the practice of appearing at the most inopportune moments with some exotic foodstuff she had purloined on the estate. Crying, "Don't let it cool down, doctor. As regards The drink he bought in large quantities as well as long intervals, either buying to himself or more frequently as a kind of insurance, entrusting the landlord with the task, since the latter feared that the unpredictable doctor might one day withdraw his confidence, thereby depriving him of an assured income, and therefore did his utmost to satisfy the doctor in every particular, even when those particulars seemed to downright stupid to him. So there was nothing to fear regarding these two people, and as for the other residents of the estate, they had long abandoned hope that they might encroach on his privacy with a sudden attack of fever, stomach upset, or general accident as pretext without at least a warning call, since they were all convinced that with his withdrawal of such privileges, his professionalism and reliability had also vanished. While this was clearly something of an exaggeration of feeling, was not entirely unfounded, since he dedicated the greatest part of what strength remained to him to preserving his powers of memory and letting all inessential matters take care of themselves. Despite all this, he still lived in a constant state of anxiety because, as he noted in his diary with conspicuous regularity, these things take all my attention. So it didn't matter whether it was Mrs. Cranner or the landlord. He spotted at his door. He would scrutinize either silently for minutes on end, looking deep into their eyes, checking to see whether they would look down, noting how quickly they averted their gaze to see. In other words, how far their eyes betrayed them, revealing their suspicion, curiosity and fear, from which evidence he endeavored to tell whether they were still willing to stick to the agreement on which their financial arrangements depended, and only allowing them to approach once he was satisfied. He kept contact to a minimum, refusing to return their greetings, casting only a glance at the 4 bags they carried, watching their clumsy movements with such an unfriendly expression on his face, hearing their awkwardly formulated questions and excuses so impatiently, muttering away the whole time that they, particularly Mrs. Cranner, constantly bit off their sentences, quickly put away the money he had put out for them, and passing away without counting it. This more or less explained why he was so nervous about being anywhere near the door. It made him feel decidedly ill, gave him a headache, or made him feel breathless every time he was obliged, due to some carelessness on their part, to get up out of the armchair and fetch something from the far end of the room, so that each time he did only after a long preliminary struggle with himself. He strove to be through with as quickly as possible, although no matter how quickly he accomplished it. By the time he got back to his chair, his day had been ruined, and he was seized by a mysterious, bottomless anxiety. So the hand holding the pencil or the glass began to tremble, and he filled his journal with nervous little jottings that naturally he scrubbed out with crude, furious movements. It was no wonder then that everything in this accursed corner of the estate was upside down. The mud that had been trailed in had dried in thick layers on the wholly rotten, disintegrating floorboards, which grew by the wall nearest the door, and off to the right lay a very recognizable patch that had been trampled flat, surrounded by remnants of food, plastic bags, a few empty medicine bottles, bits of notepaper, and worn-down pencils. The doctor, quite contrary, some believed, to his perhaps exaggerated and probably pathological love of order, did nothing to remedy his intolerable situation. He was convinced that his small corner of the estate was part of his hostile outside world, and this was all the evidence he needed to justify his fear, anxiety, restlessness, and uncertainty, for this was only a single defensive wall to protect him, the rest being vulnerable. The room opened on to a dark corridor where weeds grew, this being the way to the toilet whose cistern had not worked for years. Its absence being remedied by a bucket that Mrs. Craner was obliged to refill these days a week, three days a week. At one end of the corridor were two doors, with great rusty locks hanging from them. The other end led outside. Mrs. Craner, who had her own keys to the place, could always smell the strong sour stench as soon as she entered. It got into her clothes, and, as she always insisted, it settled in her skin as well, so it was no use trying to wash it off. Even washing twice on days when she was visiting the doctor, her efforts were pointless. That was the reason she gave Mrs. Halleck and Mrs. Schmitz for the brief time she spent indoors. She was simply incapable of enduring the stench for more than 2 minutes at a time, because I tell you that smell is unbearable, simply unbearable. I don't even know how it is possible to live with such a terrible smell. He is, after all, an educated man and can see. The doctor ignored the unbearable smell as he did everything else that did not directly impinge on his observation path. And the more he ignored such things, the more attention and expertise he devoted to maintaining the order around him. The food, the cutlery, the cigarettes, the matches in the back, all with the correct distance between them on the table. The windows sill, the window sill. The window sill. The area around the armchair and the fiercely aggressive rot on the already ruined floorboards, and at dusk he would feel a warm glow, a degree of contentment on surveying the subtly darkening room, recognizing that everything was under his firm, omnipotent control. he had been aware for months that there was no point in further experimentation, but then he realized that even if he wanted to, he was unable to make the slightest change to any of it. No modification could conclusively be proved better, because he was afraid that in itself the desire for change was only a subtle sign of his failing memory. So, doing nothing, he simply remained on the alert, careful to preserve his failing memory against the decay that consumed everything around him, much as he had done from the moment that once the closing on the estate had been announced, and he personally had decided to stay behind and survive on what remained until the decision to reserve the closure should be taken. Had gone up to the mill with the elder Horrogos girl to observe the terrible racket of the abandonment of the place, with everyone rushing around and shouting, the tracks in the distance like refugees fleeing the scene, when it seemed to him that the mill's death sentence had brought the whole estate to a condition of near collapse, and from that day on he felt too weak to hold by himself the triumphal progress of the wrecking process. However he might try, there being nothing he could do in the face of the power the ruined houses, walls, trees, and fields, the birds that dived from their high station, the beasts that scurried forth, and all human bodies desired and hopes, knowing he wouldn't in any case have the strength, however he tried, to resist this treacherous assault on humanity, and knowing this, he understood just in time that the best he could do was to use his memory to fend off the sinister, underhanded process of decay, trusting in the fact that since all that mason might build, carpenter might construct, women might stitch, indeed all that men and women had brought forth with bitter tears was bound to turn to an undifferentiated running underground mysteriously ordained mush, his memory would remain lively and clear right until his organs surrendered and conformed to the contract, whereby their business affairs were wound up. That is to say, until his bones and flesh fell prey to the vultures hovering over death and decay. He decided to watch everything very carefully and to record it constantly, all with the aim of not missing the smallest details, because he realized with a shock that to ignore the apparently insignificant was to admit that one was condemned to sit defenseless on the parapet connecting the rising and falling members of the bridge between chaos and comprehensive order. However apparently insignificant the event, whether it be the ring of tobacco ash surrounding the table, the direction from which the wild geese first appeared, or a series of seemingly meaningless human movements, he couldn't afford to take his eyes off it and must note it all down, since only by doing so could he hope not to vanish one day and fall a silent captive to the infernal arrangement whereby the wood decomposes but is at the same time constantly in the process of self-construction. It was not, however, enough to remember things conscientiously. that was insufficient in itself, not up to the task. One had to compile and comprehend such signs as still remained in order to discover the means whereby the perfectly maintained memory sphere of influence might be extended and sustained over a period. The best course, then, thought the doctor during his visit to the mill, would be to reduce the minimum such events as would tend to increase the number of things I have to keep an eye on. And that very night, having told the useless Horogos girl to clear off home, informing her he no longer required her services, he set up his observation post by the window and began planning the elements of a system that some people might consider insane. Dawn was beginning to break outside, and in the distance, 4 ragged crows were wheeling menacingly above the sides. So he adjusted the blanket around his shoulders and automatically lit a cigarette. During the Cretaceous period, Cretaceous. During the Cretaceous period, it has since been discovered there were 2 classes of material that comprise the body of our homeland. An inner mass shows signs of more regular sinking. A trough-like region developed that is progressively filled in and all but buried by a kind of basin deposit. At the periphery of the trough, on the other hand, we find signs of folding. That is to say, a synclinical system is in formation. And now a new chapter begins in the history of the landmass. That is Inner Hungary. A new developmental stage in which, by a process of recreation, the heretofore close relationship between the framework of outer folds and the inner mass breaks down. The tensions within the Earth's crust seek an equilibrium which does in fact duly follow when the unyielding inner mass that has hitherto been the determinant begins to collapse and sink, thereby bringing into existence one of the most beautiful basin groups in Europe. And as the sinking continues, the basin is filled by the Neozine Sea. He looked up from his book and saw an unexpected wind had suddenly sprung up, as if intent on trashing the area. In the east, the horizon was flooded by bright red sunlight, and then, all at once, the orb itself appeared, pale and wan in a heap of lowering cloud. On the narrow path beside the Schmidts and headmaster's houses, the acacias were panicking, shaking their tiny crowns in surrender. The wind was wildly driving dense balls of dead leaves before it, and a terrified black cat darted through the fence of the headmaster's house. He pushed aside his book, pulled out his journal, and shivered in the cool draft that crept through the window. He stepped out his cigarette on the wooden arm of his chair, put on his glasses, ran his eye over what he had written in the night, then noted by way of continuation. Storm coming must put the window rags in place for everything. Jack is still inside. A cat in the headmaster's house I haven't seen before. What the hell is a cat doing here? He must have been frightened by something. He squeezed through such a narrow gap, its spine particularly flat against the ground. It only took a moment. I can't sleep. I have a headache. He drained the contents of his Kalinka glass, then immediately refilled it to the same level. He removed his spectacles and closed his eyes. He saw a vague, very distinguishable figure, a tall, awkward man with a large body dashing into the darkness. Only later did he notice that the crooked road littered with many obstacles, came to a sudden end. He did not wait for the figure to fall down the chasm, but opened his eyes in fear. Suddenly it was as if a bell were tolling, though only for a moment, then silent. A bell, and quite close, too. Or so it seemed for a moment. Very close. He survived the estate with an icy expression. He saw a blurred face in the Schmidt's window and quickly recognized Futaki's creased features. He looked scared, leaning out of the open window, searching intently for something above the houses. What did he want? The doctor pulled a notebook marked Futaki from among the pile of writings at the end of the able and found the relevant page. Futaki is frightened of something. He was looking out of the window at dawn with a startled expression. Futaki fears death. He threw back his palinka and quickly refilled the glass. He lit a cigarette and remarked aloud, "You'll all cheese it soon. You two are going to cheese it. Futaki, don't get so worked up." After a few moments, the rain began to fall. Soon enough, it was pouring down, quickly filling the shallower ditches. Tiny streams were already zigzagged in every direction, like liquid lightning. The doctor watched all this, deeply absorbed, then set to making a rough sketch of the scene in his notebook. Carefully and conscientiously, marking the smallest puddle, the direction of the current, and, having finished, noting the same underneath. The room slowly brightened. The bare bulb hanging from the ceiling threw a cold light over it. The doctor forced himself up from the chair, pushed away the blanket, and turned the light off before sitting back again. He took a can of fish and some cheese from the cardboard box at the left-hand side of the chair. The cheese had grown moldy here and there, and the doctor took some time examining it before throwing it into the litter basket by the door. He opened the can and slowly and methodically chewed his way through mouthfuls before swallowing them. Then he threw back another glass of palinka. He was no longer cold, but kept the blanket around him for a while. He laid his book in his lap, then suddenly filled up his glass. It is interesting to note at the end of the Ponticum era, when the great lowland sea had mostly subsided, leaving a large shallow lake roughly the size of the Bataton, how much destruction was caused by the combined forces of the wind and water in the beating of the waves. What is this supposed to be? Prophecy or geological history? The doctor fumed. He turned the page. At the same time, the entire area of the lowlands begins to rise, and so the waters of lesser lakes start to drain off to more distant territories too. Without the genetic elevation of this central Titian mass, we could not begin to explain the rapid disappearance of the Levantine lakes. Mhm. In the Pleistocene era, after the disappearance of the various standing waters, only minor lakes, marshes, and bogs remained as signs of the lost inland sea. Okay, I will stop here tonight. And yeah, let me look up this word, epirogenetic. Epiro. Yeah, I think this is the word. Zero. Yeah, I believe the word epigenetic is the an adjective form of epirogeny. Epirogeny. And this is a variant spelling of epirogeny. Epirogeny. Yeah. Pyrogenetic. And
Epirogeny.
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 Epirogeny. Well, this means uplift or depression of the Earth's crust, affecting large areas of land or ocean bottom. And yeah, so it it's a jargon in geology. Yeah. Epirogeny. How about this? Epirogeny. Oh yeah, so this word. So let's keep the other one. Okay, so let's review the words of night. And morose. Morose is an adjective meaning sullen, gloomy, showing a brooding ill humor. Morose.
Punctilious.
Punctilious. Punctilious. Punctilious. Apparently related to punctually. The punctilious means strictly attentive to detail, meticulous or fastidious, particularly to cause or conventions. Precise or scrupulous, finicky or nitpicky. Win. Purloin. To take the property of another, often in breach of trust. To appropriate wrongfully, to steal. To commit theft. To thieve. Purloin. Cistern. Cistern.
Cistern.
Cistern. So here R is not sounded. A reservoir or tank for holding water, especially for catching and holding rainwater for later use. In a flush toilet, the container in which the water used for flushing held a toilet tank. Oh yeah, that makes sense. So this This basically means a toilet tank. Okay. Impinge. To make a physical impact on, to interfere with, to have an effort upon, especially a negative one. Impinge. Window sill. The horizontal member protruding from the base of the window frame. Cretaceous. Of or relating to chalk. One. Pale, sickly looking, dim, faint, bland, uninterested. And pyrogeny. Broad regional upward of the cratonic portions of continents. Okay, so next time I will continue to read chapter 3, and the story will get more interested. Alright, thanks for listening, and bye-bye.